rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view.
Hey everybody, it's Razib again with a conversation with Josiah Neely. We are here at the end of October, recording before Halloween, Evil Devil's Day. But just logistical notes. We are on YouTube. If you want to subscribe on YouTube, the ungated version, obviously. We're also on Apple Podcast. If you're a millennial and you like it non-visual, I'm not doing transcripts partly because nobody's asked. I think Substack generates auto transcripts, but I haven't paid anyone to comb through those and fix those. But people are interested in that, pipe up. As per usual, we're open to topic suggestions. We're trying to do things that are timely. So that's that. I am gonna go to Hereticon next week, and I cannot talk about anything that happens at Hereticon apparently. So, but I'm gonna tell you guys, I am gonna be at Hereticon. If any of the listeners are at Hereticon, So I'll be there, and then once I'm in the Hereticon box, it's like I disappear from the world, I guess, for a little while, and then and then I'm probably gonna swing through West Coast, East Coast in November a bit. We'll see. Just I don't know why listeners would want to know this, viewers, but I'm around. So I'm just Razib about the country. So as we're recording, by the way, thanks for everyone who started being a paid sub. I think we're figuring out the strategy for that. It's everything's going well. I think, Josiah, you're feeling pretty good about the podcast. We got a groove. I think we know how this works. We got the domain name now, and we have the video part of it. Also, we have like very, very mixed responses on the music, which I generated with Suno quickly. Yeah, some people wanted the music longer, complained when I cut it short. On the request of a very special listener, and then who might not be listening because she doesn't want to know anything about the election, I guess. But whatever. For like until middle of November, and then our friend Charles Lehman, who we saw recently, he hates it. He hates the
experience of his life listening to the intro song.
Charles. Yeah, but Charles Lehman he wants to put everyone in jail. Yeah. So just take that.
Charles Lame man, right?
Yeah. So yeah. All right. So I guess one thing I want to talk about. We usually talk about. I don't know what's going to happen when Trump is elected. No, I'm just joking. That's a joke. That's a joke. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. Actually, I'm very high volatility, but the Democrats are actually freaking out. Pretty much everyone says it and admits it. Yeah. And some people take this as a sign. Oh, there's kind of like a vibe shift, which vibes are a thing, but honestly, they're also bullshit. You can say there's a vibe shift about anything. So I know like people are talking about the vibe session and all these vibe this, vibe that. It's just a new Zoomer way of saying because I said so. Okay, so I think one hypothesis we need to consider that the Democrat anxiety and neuroticism, and Matt Iglesias pointed this out a couple of years ago, and Jeet here tried to cancel him for it because Jeet here is a retard, is that the core Democratic constituency is naturally more anxious and neurotic than the core Republican constituency. It's more female, well-educated females in particular, and liberals with high openness, or it's not the openness, but the liberals tend to have, I think, a little bit more neuroticism than conservatives. My point is, all things equal, you expect the Democrats to be more anxious. And, you know, anecdotally, I do have to say that this does seem to be a trend. I mean, I've probably been following elections closely on blogs and other things since like the 2004 election. The 2000 election was the blogs weren't a thing, so it was mostly through the New York Times, Washington Post, but definitely like up to the 2004 election, every single election, Democrats have a paranoia that they're secretly going to lose. Even before the Romney election, or Romney Obama, where it was pretty clear. I mean, I would say McCain, Obama, there was high volatility, even though Obama won with a bigger margin. I feel like it was a more volatile election.
It was close until there was a worldwide financial collapse.
Exactly. So that was like the high volatility there. So okay, that was anxious too, because a lot of people were like, a black guy named Barack Hussein Obama. Are we actually going to elect him? Are we going to assassinate him? Like what? What's going to happen, right? Whereas I think 2012, it was like a less volatile election. It was less elastic, even though the margin was closer. But there were still like Democrats that were anxious. So basically, my contention is a lot of these vibes are not actually vibes reflecting like the external environment. The vibes come from the like I'm trying to say that there's an essentialist aspect here. Democrats are going to be anxious. Republicans are always going to be conspiratorial. So I have a friend. I'm not gonna say who it is, but I think he knows what it is. I mean, I'm just like gonna say like if Trump wins, he'll be like okay, but if Trump loses, like I know he's gonna be having a meltdown. Just like it's just a fact, okay? And that's just how it is. Yeah, just for his mental health, I definitely I don't know.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, I believe it is the case that liberals, there's a higher prevalence of mental illness, as opposed to conservatives, at least certainly on the center right. I think.
Yeah. This has been like a trend that's been happening more recently, especially like young liberal women, something like over 50% report some mental illness.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this would have been true 50 years ago, say, although maybe, but it does seem to have gotten more pronounced. So I think that is accurate. However, I will say I'm in a lot of group chats and, lists and discussion text groups or whatever with conservatives. And a lot of them, to be honest, it seem kind of anxious and whiny about the election. Not so much now, because the vibes are in Trump's favor or whatnot. But there was certainly a period, after Biden dropped out and Harris came in, and then also even earlier during the primaries, where it was, black pill is the phrase, just despair, just focusing on the negative. And there was one guy, I mean, I can, there were a lot, like there's a lot of this stuff, but I remember there's one guy who he would write like 5 long messages a day. Every day it was just like the same thing. It's like, oh man, we're going to lose. Trump is turning off suburban women. Why didn't we nominate DeSantis or Haley? The polling is not great, blah, 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 blah. So, overlapping bell curves at the very least, I think you have to say overlapping bell curves. There are a lot of, anxious people out there, at least sometimes. I don't know, it is interesting because it does kind of feel like, like if you were to just look at the coverage and the way the campaigns are acting and how the supporters of Trump and Harris are acting online, and you didn't look at any numbers, you were just looking at that, you would assume that Trump was up like 8-10 points, or I mean, like not maybe not 8, but like 5 points, right? 5-6 points, maybe, right? So like a very comfortable lead where, Harris is clearly behind, desperate. And you look at the polling, it doesn't really bear that out. Now, the polls, if you look at the polls, they have moved in Trump's direction, both nationally, actually more nationally even than in the battlegrounds. But we're talking like a 1 point swing or something, instead of being down 3 points, he's up 0.5 points in some state. And that's just really, really tight. I mean, that's certainly within the margin of error. It's certainly, you know, it's a matter of like how the polls and everybody else accounts for like low propensity voters and does all those sorts of weights and whatever. And even if you look at, the betting markets and the prediction models, Nate Silver models, they all give Trump an edge, but it's not a huge edge. It's like, I think Polymarket, I looked and it was like 60-40 basically, maybe a little bit more for Trump, but that's still, I mean, 40% chance of something happening. That's a big, that's not like inconceivable, right? So I don't know. So then the
Yeah.
question is, like what maybe people just on an emotional level, like maybe intellectually they understand that 60-40 is not the same as 90-10 or 100-0, but on an emotional level they just treat it that way. Maybe you do hear people talk about like maybe the internal polling looks pretty bad for Kamala, like they're worried about all sorts of stuff. You definitely see signs not only from Harris, but also from some other, like the Senate candidates in some of these Great Lakes states, who Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. If you look at the public polling, he's still up. I mean, it's a tightened race, but he's still up. But he seems to be acting like he's scared. He ran some ads like saying that he agreed with Trump about a bunch of stuff, and other candidates have just kind of refused to campaign with Harris. They've distanced themselves. So it's not just the Harris campaign. Just in general, there seems to be this idea that something's not right, and is that just a feeling? Is it based on, internal data? I just don't think we know. We're going to find out maybe in, another week and a half. So
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. One thing I'm going to say a couple of things here. There's a lot of discussion about the betting markets and the prediction models and everything like that. And obviously, part of the problem is people, and this goes back to 2012 when models start to become big. People don't understand probability, and they confuse probabilities with the polls and all these things. And I have wondered, like, what value does it add, the election betting markets, to say that it's like 50-50 or 55-45 or whatever. I mean, a little bit of fake precision. On the other hand, I would say it's a nice anchor for everyone to agree on, just to like put a number down, because some people, when they say, it's a toss up, they could mean like 2-1 odds. I don't know. I mean, unless they say it explicitly. So it's like, what do you really mean? Like, I think my intuition says 60-40 is plausible, but also it's based on like a week trading data. Like, I don't follow this stuff super closely, to be honest, because I think I'm just not a racehorse guy. I think so. With why are the Harris people? Why are the Democrats nervous? I mean, I think part of the issue is clearly enthusiasm gap, due to the fact that the joy is leaking out of her campaign, because she's just kind of not doing as well as she did earlier, where there was like, avoid the media, et cetera, et cetera. Other issues also, I do have to say, um, the Biden campaign in 2020 was good because they ignored social media, and they just did their thing. Biden, won back a lot of older white males, for example. He did worse among he did worse among a lot of minorities, I think, than Hillary, right? Maybe not blacks, but
Yeah, I think the only group that he did not do worse than Hillary with was white men.
Yeah, which matters because that's a lot of them. Okay, all right. So, and Kamala Harris in 2019, her campaign was famous for winning the social media engagement wars, but they striked out all sorts of crazy left wing positions. But they're like, oh, look at what Twitter says, Yeah. Well, she's not quite like that right now. There's a lot of Biden people in her. in her campaign. But like for example, she did not speak at the Al Smith dinner because her advisor thought it might alienate, her abortion rights supporters and stuff like that. This sort of behavior, or she's not going on Rogan. This sort of behavior to me is indicative of someone that lives in a bubble. And I'm gonna just like say it. One of the problems the Democrats have is their female staff read the room too much, and they are basically, I think, engaging in positional games with each other within the office rather than being outward focusing on like what they need to do for the campaign. The example that I'll give, I think I've given this on the conversation before, was during Build Back Better, the staffers, quite clearly female from what I could tell with the reporting, that Biden had, were worried that it would give too much money to white males because they do construction. And I'm just like, have you been to a construction site anywhere in Texas? Like you can't. Nobody speaks English, you know. So like these are people that have never worked in construction. Okay, these are obviously all college educated women, you know, and so like they have like no, and they have like these theories about race and gender and intersectionality, obviously taken over. The fact that this is leaking is embarrassing. It shows that they're like totally unaware, or they lack a self awareness of who they are versus who the electorate was or is. And I think this is like again playing out. Um, I think that the Trump campaign has some of the same. Everyone has the bubble problems, but I think their problems are straightforward. Where they think like, oh, we're going to win by 25 points or something because some of them are retarded. You know, like a lot of them are not like they're not like lifers in government. They've interacted with different types in all walks of life, and a lot of them are less elite, and so they have a natural intuitive temperature. Anyway, I've been talking for a while, so
Yeah. I think that's right. I will say if I was an advisor for the Kamala Harris campaign, I don't think I would tell her to go on Rogan either. Obviously there's a lot of undecided or swing or gettable voters who listen to Rogan, but she's just not good in interviews, especially interviews that are not softball, I would say, right? So even some of the, 60 Minutes or some of the other interviews that she's done, like they had a town hall. They had a town hall event recently, and someone asked her, I don't know if you saw this, someone asked her, what is one of your weaknesses? And did you hear this? Do you know what she said her weakness was?
she's a nerd or something.
No. She said, well, my weakness is I like to hear from all sorts of different perspectives. And so when there's an issue that comes up, I ask everybody to go through it and give their view. And so it's a very, very job interview question, where you say you're asked to give a weakness and you give something that's not a weakness at all. But anyway, she's not like, I could name a weakness of hers. So a weakness is she's not very great speaking extemporaneously, especially with a non super friendly interview. And, for Rogan, that would not be a friendly interview. I think it's, I don't even know how it's going to go with Trump. I think Trump can handle himself. I think it'll be fine. But Rogan, he could be talking about the border. He could bring up the trans prisoner stuff. He could bring up aliens. He could bring up
He's like, here's Trump. He's like, Joe, ganja, you're gonna love it.
Right.
The best.
Yeah.
Decriminalization. Just you can smoke in the White House.
Right. And it's long. Maybe it'll be shorter. Maybe they'll do shorter, but the Rogan interviews, they go on and on. So that could turn out very badly for her. If she had gone on Rogan, that really would be, I would think, a sign that they view themselves as being in a desperate position. They got nothing to lose. So they're yeah.
Well, so we've been a little bit bearish, I guess, on the Harris campaign, but the reality is 50-50. And let's talk about the upsides are, who is their core constituency? College educated women. I mean, aside from senior citizens, aside from like upper middle class senior citizens, that is the most high propensity. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like they're just gonna vote no matter what. They will vote for a yellow dog over a Republican,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So she might not. I do think that there's an enthusiasm gap. I think the Trump fans are fans, and Kamala fans are meh. And you know her issues, her demographic issues with men, even black men, go back to 2019. None of this is new.
Right.
But she does motivate the core Democratic constituency now of college educated women. Like that is kind of the base of the Democratic constituency. Like I would say, like for the Republicans, even if it's not the demographic base, the spiritual base are successful non college educated businessmen who own boats, right?
Right.
Right? Yeah, that's the boat guys. The boat guys with their successful contracting companies. Those are the core of the new MAGA coalition. They're kind of like the elite of the MAGA-tards. And then you have with the Democrats, their elite are kind of like liberal arts educated, women who have like marginal white collar jobs. You know, I mean, there are some like really high powered professionals, obviously, but the point is, there's only so many corporate lawyers out there. But there are a lot of HR people. There are a lot of like marketing people at companies and other things like that. These are the kind of like office jobs, college educated women that work in office jobs, often living in urban areas, single, deep into their 30s, like Kamala, right?
Yeah.
So, actually, what did Kamala got married? When did she
Late.
get married?
She's in her 40s, I think.
Yeah.
Late.
Yeah, so she got married late. Yeah. So I mean, in a way, she is. Okay, she married Doug Emhoff in 2014.
Right. So it's 10 years ago.
Right.
She was
She was
40.
50. She was 49, 50. Yeah. I mean, they were dating earlier, presumably, but still, again, like it's not like it was like a super quick. Um, I want to say one thing also, and I tweeted this out. So her fakeness issue that I think that she has a little bit with the McDonald's thing, for example, that she probably didn't work at McDonald's. She probably just said it
Right.
because she's a politician. They lie all the time. Issue is like she starts out with this like, I'm a middle class American. She is a middle class American, and most Americans view themselves as middle class, but they're different types of middle class. She's a middle class American where her mom has a PhD in molecular biology from Berkeley, and her dad was a Stanford professor, economics professor, and her dad is black, but he's a mixed race Jamaican whose family owned slaves and was from the landed basically gentry. Yes, her mom was like a dark skinned immigrant, but her family are very accomplished, Tamil Brahmins from like South India that have like, lived across the world and stuff like that. So she comes from a professional class background. She says she's from Oakland. Actually, she grew up in Berkeley. She didn't grow up in the hills. She grew up in the flats, which makes sense because her parents were grassroots or whatnot at the time. That would be like socioeconomically, that would be definitely middle class. But like economically, probably more of a lower middle class area. That's fair. But when she went to Montreal, and she doesn't talk about her adolescence at all, she lived in a nice house with a single mom that worked at the hospital as a researcher. So, probably not super high income because it's a single, unless Donald Harris was probably giving child support. He was a professor, right? But they lived in a really nice house, and the article stated specifically that most of her friends were much poorer than her.
Right.
My point in saying all this is, she's not rich like Trump. She wasn't even like very, very upper middle class because her parents split up, and that causes issues with the fixed costs and stuff. But she was definitely not ever marginal like a lot of people in the lower middle class are, or even middle class. She was always like had a floor because her parents were educated in credentialing. And so she is from that class of people, who are definitely going to go to college, are definitely going to law school, and are definitely going to have a professional career. And so when she tries to like connect with Americans, I think that they get a little annoyed because, it's just it's like Barack Hussein Obama. I don't think he tried to connect in ways that he could, but he never hid the fact that his name was Barack Hussein Obama, that his dad was from Kenya, all these things. I mean, it's just like he tried to like soft pedal the parts of it, like the Indonesia phase when he was Muslim, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there were things he soft pedaled, but the point was like he rearranged the real constituents of his life. Where I feel like Kamala is trying to present herself as a somewhat different person than she is. Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that could be.
well, I was saying that you grew up, saying that you're from Oakland.
Right. Yes, that's
That's a different vibe than saying that you're from Berkeley. She was born in Oakland, so it's technically true.
right.
But she grew up in Berkeley.
Grew up in Berkeley. Yes, right, in Canada, and all of that. Yeah. No. I mean, that's fair. I think that's right. Most politicians in general. I mean, they have a tendency to try and like overstate their middle class or working class roots or whatnot, to the extent they can. Most of them are not in that category, I guess you would say. Although, I guess the VP nominees, Vance and Walz, maybe you could kind of say that. We all know about Vance's, troubled family background, and then I don't really know a lot about Walz's family background, but if you grew up in rural Nebraska,
They rode their bikes. They rode their bikes.
their bikes until the lights came on. Yeah. But I mean, even if you're like a really rich guy in rural Nebraska, your life is not that much different from if you're a poor guy in rural Nebraska, I think. Like, especially, 50 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. So Walls just his dad was a teacher and then school superintendent. School superintendents tend to be, I mean, so in the small pond, he was probably
You're right.
upper middle class.
Yeah. But your life is not that different, like even in, I mean, I lived for a while in Terre Haute, right? Terre Haute, Indiana, which is, I mean, it's still a town of 50,000 people or whatever. And of course, there are rich people in Terre Haute, Indiana, but other than like, I mean, I guess there were like a couple of families that like had owned the town at some point or something, but mostly like if you're the kid of one of the richer people or like the leading people in the town, your friend group is just going to be everybody else in the town. You're going to the same school, you're right in the same, you're shopping at the same shops. There's just not that much opportunity for inequality of standard of living there, right? The way that there is in like New York City or San Francisco or other things like that. So it still matters, it still exists, but it's all kind of it's blurred, I would say, because there's just not enough people there for it to be.
Yeah. I grew up. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Eastern Oregon, and there was one high school in town. There was no. I think some people homeschooled.
Yeah.
But there was no other. There was no private school. There was no Christian school. There was no Catholic school. Actually, it's just I grew up in a town of 12,000 people, and like there, like if the town was like 75% Catholic, probably there could be a Catholic school. But the town was like 15% Catholic, so it just wasn't the demographics for that sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, and like everybody's kids, like the kid of the whatever, like kids of like the poor working class people went to the same high school as the kids of the doctors or the dentists or the McDonald's franchise owners or whatever, like those sort of the car dealership owners. So yeah, I mean that is a thing in small town America. So we have a couple weeks before the election. One thing I want to say is a lot like billions of dollars are going to be spent, it seems, and a lot of it is actually Harris has Washington Post did a piece about this, but not only does a lot of the corporate establishment, aside from Elon and that Silicon Valley contingent, and obviously energy, there's some sectors that are very pro-Trump, but upper middle class is really, really behind Harris. Like, if you look at like the donation patterns, it's like skewed toward Harris. It's like vast majority of the country is skewed towards Harris. And it's just because the upper middle class really likes her, or they really hate Trump. I think it's really hate Trump. And that's just what it is. it's probably not going to make that big of a difference, but it just the money shows you kind of like the class bias of what's going on. Um, and I feel like they're going to throw more and more money in, the more scared they get.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's a reflection of fear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're gonna throw in every last dollar that you have at this point. I mean, what are you waiting for? You know, as far as like if you got the money, you got to get it out the door and spend it and ads and so on and so forth. The messaging in the campaign, it seems a little erratic as they move into the home stretch. You know, maybe this is another indicator that they seem to think that they're not doing that well, is they kind of keep like switching messages around, you know. So for a little while, the like last week or a week before, the kind of message was Trump is old, right? He's old, he's exhausted, he's getting senile. It was kind of the same thing that people had been saying about Biden. Now they were like, okay, well, that worked against Biden, maybe let's do it against Trump. And frankly, I mean, they seem to have mostly kind of dropped that now. I didn't think that it was likely to work. For one thing, I mean, the Biden thing, like, Trump is an old guy, but the Biden thing, you just had to look at clips of him or whatever, and it was pretty apparent, right? That he like walked like an old guy, he talked like an old guy, he had increasing senior moments, other sort of stuff. Trump, I mean, you could say that like he's obviously gotten older, but it's not like that, right? It's certainly not on the same level. It's certainly compared. Yeah,
He's slowed down, but he hasn't like fallen off a cliff. That's the difference.
yeah, exactly. And some of the things, like you could tell that some of the things that they would say, like they're um, like they were intentionally dishonest. I think you have to say, where they would be like, "Oh, Trump, aimlessly wandered around the stage, right?" And then you see him, and he's like, you see the video clip, and he's just like dancing to YMCA, which he's been doing for 8 years.
Sure. Yeah, they're just. I mean, yeah, obviously they're trying to like play up a narrative. I would say if Trump was running against Pete Buttigieg, I think the age contrast would be more plausible because Buttigieg is he's sharp, he's on his feet, and so you have like this young, eloquent, whatever, energetic. Kamala's not old. I'm sure she has plenty of energy. The problem is she's not very articulate on her feet,
Right.
and so that's not going to be that great of like a big contrast with a guy who, yeah, he's slowed down, but who are you to talk?
Yeah.
If it was Buttigieg, if it was like some person who could just like talk like, okay, this is like a person at the peak of their powers. Okay, Trump's decline would be more salient.
Right. And I also sort of think the Democrats shot themselves in the foot on this issue by sticking with Biden through the summer, because like if Biden had said, I'm not going to run, and they had just like a real primary and someone else had emerged, then maybe the age issue would be more potent. But now, whenever they try and bring it up, I think in the back of people's minds, they're like, well, wait a minute. Like Biden, I mean, he was even worse than Trump by any metric, and you guys were saying he was fine, and then you like junk, so it just doesn't seem like it can't hit the way that it might under other circumstances. And anyway, now it seems like they've dropped that for the new argument, which is that Trump is the American Hitler. Biden's argument against Trump was that he is a threat to democracy and is, authoritarian. I don't know that he ever called him Hitler himself, but it was vaguely along those lines. And after Biden dropped out and Trump got shot, they kind of dropped that for a while, as you recall. And now they've decided, no, we're going to go back to it again. There was a story in the Atlantic. Frankly, a lot of it just seemed like BS. I mean, there was a whole thing about Trump. There's a female Hispanic soldier who died, and Trump had made some supportive comments. I think she met with them in the White House, and he said he was going to help with the funeral or whatever. And then supposedly, when they got sent the bill for the funeral, he got really mad and made derogatory remarks about her or whatever. according to some anonymous source that talked to Jeffrey Goldberg in the Atlantic. But everyone who was there says on the record it didn't happen. The sister of the woman who died, she said this didn't happen. And I actually voted for Trump. I support him. He was great for our family or whatever. But so there was that. That was it was the Atlantic article was kind of odd because like there was a first long section that was all about that, and then it switches over to like Hitler stuff and how Trump supposedly said that he wished his generals would obey his orders like Hitler's generals obeyed Hitler's orders, which also is denied. Like the White House, everybody says that didn't happen. John Kelly, who's the chief of staff, I think he said he's made. I don't know if he's the source, but he has said something similar that Trump said something like that. It's in the realm of like, I think it's in the realm of because the context is, Trump is mad because he's giving orders to like the military to do various stuff and they're just not doing it. I mean, famously, he told the generals, hey, I want you to get troops out of Syria. And they said, okay, yes, sir, Mr. President, that's done. The troops are gone. And they just didn't do it. They left the troops there, which, I mean, I think we're supposed to have civilian control over the military. So that seems like kind of bad. So it's within the realm of the possibility for me to imagine Trump in a somewhat flippant manner saying something like that. Like, man, I wish I had generals, that just obeyed me the way that they would obey a dictator, like Hitler. Now, Hitler's generals did try and kill him. So, historically, if he did say that, I don't know that it's terribly accurate.
Yeah.
But
there was a
sure.
Tom Cruise movie about it. The only thing is like everyone knew what was going to happen.
Yes, right.
Are they going to succeed in assassinating the Führer?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, if you ever seen Inglorious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino movie, that would like for the entire movie, I was like, okay, like obviously they're not going to succeed, and then at the end, it's like, no, they just killed Hitler and Goebbels and the other people. So okay, you can do that. That's not how it worked out in history, but or did it? That's an interesting.
All right, let's not go Russian now.
Right.
Russians have these alternative historical timelines and stuff. Right, I mean, so October surprises. Yeah.
The point is they're going after him as Hitler. As a threat. And there's also stuff. I think there was like, so we're in October, and a big part of the October campaign is the October surprise, right? And people have been talking about all sorts of potential October surprises this time, most of which I don't expect to pan out. I know, maybe you've heard this. I'm just going to say it. I don't believe it, right? I'm just giving an example. A lot of people have been saying that some minor is going to come out and accuse Tim Walz of molesting him, right? This is. Oh,
really? Oh, he is a coach in the Midwest.
Coach, yes, right. I don't think there's any basis for this, but this is just the sort of thing that if you're in like group chats, people are like, "Oh yeah." This is
I mean, I feel like during the interview they would have asked him that. No, I'm just saying, like the issue is like if he had done that, he would give a different reason for not becoming vice president because it would come out. I think Denny Hastert never would have run for vice president because he wouldn't want to go through the vetting.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose so. Yeah. So it's possible. And then there's, there was also stuff Mark Halperin said a couple days ago that there was some story circulating that if it were true and came out, it would be the end of Trump's career, end of the campaign. It's kind of hard to imagine what that would even be. But yeah, so like a lot of people are thinking about it. I went back, I looked, because October surprise.
What if Trump was gay?
I don't know that like, At first, like, what kind of gay are we talking about here? But no, I don't even think that would make it would be hard to believe. But as long as he kept the same voice, if he kept the same Trump voice, I think it would be fine. If he got a lisp all of
So
a sudden,
we have we have the best bathhouses,
right.
beautiful, big.
Uh-huh.
Many people are saying that. No, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if he came out as trans, that would be pretty weird. But yeah, no, I don't think there's a lot of chance of that. Um, but yeah, like October surprises, I guess, have gone back to the 19th century, where like at the end of the election, something comes out. Either it's some just random event that happens, or a lot of times it's contrived. I think I was looking at like historical examples. One of my favorites, it was in the 19 in Wikipedia has a list of October surprises, and one of them says a month before the 1940 presidential election, FDR's press secretary kneed a black guy in the groin outside Madison Square Garden. So I don't know. that that was potentially a big scandal. Um, but there were a lot of stuff, some of it like LBJ, he famously ordered a halt to bombing of North Vietnam right before the election to try and swing that. And there were like various things that happened in different elections in terms of like stories that leak that may or may not be true. One thing about the October surprise is, like some people do, I think campaigns sometimes do try to hold stories to the very end, either because they won't hold up to scrutiny or because voters just tend to overweight recent events, So in 2000, I think the weekend before the election, there was a story that came out that George Bush had been arrested for drunk driving, like back in the 80s or maybe even the 70s. So it was several decades old. And, in the grand scheme of things, that's probably not a huge story. Everybody knew that Bush had drinking issues and then he had given up drinking, and this would have been before that or whatnot, But it does seem like it's plausible that in the absence of that story, I mean, maybe that story cost Bush like 1 million votes, right? And if it hadn't been for that, like obviously he still would have won, but it wouldn't have been the like months long hanging Chad thing, because Bush would have won by 10,000 votes in Florida, and maybe he would have won the popular vote, and so it wouldn't have been an issue, right? So you don't have to worry about like stuff that comes out at the very end. People have been talking about what the possible October surprises might be. We mentioned some of them in terms of scandals. Obviously, a big thing that could, like, you think, what could happen in the next 10 days, right? Like Israel attacking Iran, that's possible, right? That could be something, maybe. One thing that I was concerned about, and I'm maybe not hugely surprised that it didn't happen, but, I thought it was a realistic possibility, which was that if Harris looked like she was in a lot of trouble, Biden, who had already dropped out of the race, would actually resign the presidency so she could come in and be president and get like a big boost. At this point, I think it's probably too late for that. I don't think it would be, but who knows? I don't know. Do you have any?
Josiah,
Yes.
I'm not going anywhere, Jack.
Right. Yeah. You also had to get Biden to go along with it. Yeah. It'd be a problem. Yeah.
I mean, he's like, no,
Yeah.
no. He's gonna like stay until the very last second.
Yeah.
He's gonna savor it like a cup of coffee,
Right. Yeah.
Like he will literally be in a wheelchair soiling himself on the very last day of his term, but he's gonna be enjoying taking that dump in his diaper as president.
All right.
You
That's a rather graphic thing. So yeah, so that one probably is not going to happen. I mean, someone, God forbid, you could have another assassination attempt, right, or something going on there. I certainly hope that doesn't happen for any of the candidates. But other than that, I mean, one thing about the dynamic of this race is it's hard to move it. Like people seem kind of set in their views, and it can wiggle around a little bit, but it would have to be something big, in terms of like a new story or whatnot for people to. I mean, yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you have any?
Well, so I think
The October surprise.
I don't have like a predictor. I think it's gonna be something like I think it'll be something sexual or because like I mean Trump was at a lot of sketchy parties in the 80s and 90s. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's plausible, and it's a long time ago, so the corroboration is not going to be there. So it's like some sort of accusation. Um, I think part of the problem though is this is the third time that this guy is running for president.
Right.
And so I think
hasn't already,
yeah, I think the low hanging fruit was picked.
Yeah.
I think that was that was like grabbing by the pussy. I think that was
Right.
the big October surprise.
Yeah.
I think like the low hanging fruit has been picked. Not only is this his third run, I mean, they didn't really the establishment. Let's put it the establishment on the right and the left didn't really want him to run again. For this 2024. So I think they've been looking for something to knock him out with for years. The reality though is he doesn't drink and do drugs that we know of. I think that actually probably means that he more is an observer at these degenerate events that he was at as opposed to a participant. I think that's probably part of the issue. I think if he drank or did drugs, I think like we would have like reports of seriously sketch behavior. But as it is, he was just around sketch behavior, which people just don't feel like that rises to the same level. Just how it is,
Yeah.
Yeah, there were people doing cocaine all around him, but like whatever, he wasn't doing it, right? I think that's or whatever sexual thing was happening. It was like, but he wasn't doing it. He was sober.
Right.
He was just observing. So I don't know. There's just I think that's part of the issue. Like his proximity to a lot of sketchy things is the reality, but he was also a very wealthy celebrity in New York City in the 80s or 90s. So it's almost like it's priced in. It's priced in that there's going to be like some sketchy things about who he was associating with or where he was. But as long as he himself is not a principal, I think it just doesn't have the same bite.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then also, I do sort of feel like people's opinions of Trump are so set that it would be hard to change them. Like even if there was something that realistically should change it, like if it turned out no, actually Trump has been drinking and doing drugs the entire time, like people are just gonna be like, yeah, well, I mean, maybe that explains why he is the way he is. Who cares, right? So that's just my, maybe like obviously there's got to be a few, and like the other thing is people are so used to like allegations against Trump, many of which did not pan out, that if there were something that happened, like a lot of people would just not believe it, like even if there were serious evidence of it, people would be like, it's fake news, right? So yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of potential there. So who knows?
I mean, people talk about, I mean, the October surprise, these sorts of exogenous shocks. Let's call it that. These are exogenous shocks. These are external events. External events happen, have a big effect when you don't have a lot of information. It's kind of like, use an analogy a lot of listeners can understand, or viewers, like your Uber rating. Like if you had like 5,000 Uber ratings and you have like a shitty, whatever, you're late, I don't know, you vomit in the car, that is a serious thing, but it's like it's not going to change your Uber rating too much. You got 5,000.
Yes, that's a great.
If you got like 10 reviews, that matters. So George W. Bush, yeah, he was on the national scene, but he was actually, to most people, before he ran for president, he was more visible as the owner of the Texas Rangers.
Right.
That's what I knew him for. I follow politics. I read the New York Times. I knew he was governor of Texas, but the reality is for most people, they saw him on ESPN or some baseball game in the stands as the owner of the Texas Rangers in the early '90s. That's what they knew George W. Bush for. Back when his dad was running for whatever. So there wasn't much about him. He was seen as a relatively bipartisan figure, a uniter, not a divider. He actually won the Muslim vote probably in 2000 by targeting immigrants. Like he's a very, very different figure than what he became later. And so these sorts of new information about his, drunk driving, clearly, like I think we would explicitly say it now because there's less of a taboo about it. He probably did cocaine and other drugs, whatever.
Yeah.
Not it wasn't the same as alcohol, but whatever. He had a past of drug use. Obama admitted freely that he had a past of drug use as well.
Right.
So I think like these sorts of information just don't have an effect. Obama, there were some surprises here and there, but I think one of the issues with him is if you look at the polls, people perceived him to be a liberal black politician.
Right.
So when there was new evidence that came out that showed that he was black and liberal.
Yes, right.
It did happen. It's like, because like people would be like, he's liberal, y'all.
Yes.
And like people in Iowa were like, yeah, they do. And so it's like you have to actually have something that goes negatively against what you already perceive. So I don't know. It's like
I think
if he was.
Yeah, the only story that I think really hurt him, which fits into that, was the Jeremiah Wright stuff, because that tied into like a different. It's like, oh, maybe he's a different kind of black guy, right? He's not the like, liberal, tweedy academic type of black guy. Maybe he's the like, kind of more of a like a Hotep black nationalist kind of.
I mean, but it didn't stick because I think on some level people knew that really he's not a very religious guy and he needed a church to go to.
Yeah,
and he just picked that one.
I mean, it did. So it did. Like it didn't stick. Yeah, for that reason, he repudiated Wright. It did actually hurt him. I mean, if you look in the polling in the primary, people had this idea. I think, he was beating Clinton, and then at the end, she actually, like after that Jeremiah Wright stuff came out, she actually started to come back, and it ended up being a lot closer than did people recollect. Like he was ahead enough and had like locked it in enough that it didn't matter. But if the Jeremiah Wright thing had happened a couple months earlier, I think it's plausible that he would have lost to Clinton in the primary. Now, by the time you got to November, okay, yeah, nobody cared anymore, really.
Yeah, and one thing we need to remember about Obama is he was actually, this was a case where the establishment had picked Hillary, and he came and he kind of, he was senator for 2 years when he started running, right?
Yes, yeah.
He shouldn't have been doing that. His name is Barack Hussein Obama. What the hell, right?
Right.
So it was all like just kind of like a weird lark, it seemed, and then
but it worked.
Motherfucker ended up winning. Yeah, he won. A part of it was like the Hillary campaign. Was it Mark Penn? Like they didn't seem to really understand the mechanics and the logistics.
Right.
They weren't doing the blocking and tackling on the primaries.
Correct. Yeah, they expected it to be a cakewalk, like a coronation or whatever, and so that's part of it. And then, Hillary is just very unlikable. I'm sorry. I think we found that out like in multiple cases that she is an easy candidate to beat compared to a lot of other people, whether it's Democratic primary voters, general election voters, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to record next Friday, and that'll be before the election. So we got one more
election special.
The first of November we will record, post on the 2nd. So I guess like I'll actually do some like like check the polls and all that stuff. And then after that we will have a president-elect, or hopefully we'll have a president-elect. And then we'll figure out what we talk about besides horse race stuff, because like we're just kind of getting to the groove. This is the 14th week. As we said last week, we're gonna do 52 weeks for sure. Although I think I think we're gonna go beyond 52 weeks. Okay, so I just like put something kind of like weird, kind of not my thing, but like I think it might be interesting because Halloween's coming up. Halloween was, I think I liked Halloween as much as I liked Christmas when I was little because I lived in upstate New York, and White Christmas looks really nice, but when you live in Lake Effect area, on the edge of Lake Effect, December is just a hellish month, I have to say. And so I think I would have liked Christmas more if I had like a little bit milder weather. Not Austin mild,
Right.
but like there are pictures of me where I'm on the sidewalk and like literally there's ice walls, and like they're taller than me. So that was me when I was a little kid, and so Christmas was great, and I did like the music, I did like the trees, I did like the presents, I did like Santa, but then I also was like always terrified of like, are we gonna have like a blizzard where the power's out for a week? Because that would happen every 3 or 4 years and stuff like that. So at Halloween, it had started getting cold in upstate New York already, but it wasn't that bad, and there was candy. The downside of Halloween, of course, is there's like the scary aspect. So we'll we're gonna pay all this part. And so Halloween's coming up. So Josiah, you grew up evangelical, you're Catholic now, and you're religious. Like, I mean, what's your deal with Halloween? Like, how do you feel about it with your kids? Like, how do you explain it to them? Because Halloween, just so that, I know it's not that big of a deal in Ireland. It's kind of like an American made up thing with the way we do it. But its origin is it has All Hallows Eve, so it has a Catholic origin.
Right. Yeah.
But it also has an overlapping pagan Celtic origin with Samhain, where supposedly like the spirit world and the material world interact. And so, that's just obviously sketches it out. I mean, if you're a Protestant, a lot of Protestants don't do all the Catholic saints stuff, so they don't care that it's All Hallows Eve, right? So that's why a lot of Protestants are like, Halloween bad, Devil's Day, blah, blah, blah. Catholics have a different interpretation. Can you just talk about it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, and All Hallows Eve, November 1st is.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to khanversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see as dawn broke soft on dewy grass. They smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand